Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Welcome to Houston Sports Talk's live Texans postgame show. Robert Land alongside my co-host, Sports Radio 610's Shaun Bijani. And between the two of us, 45 years combined in sports journalism, 35 years covering Houston sports. And we've done this quite a few times, Shaun, and it just seems like it's super hard to stay awake from the Texans sometimes. I don't know if I woke you up from a nap during the game or anything like that, but they did finish the game, honest, didn't they?
They finished the game and they got their first win, man. You know, I laugh all the time when people talk about like, oh, this is such bad football. It's like, dude, you spend like 6 months out of the year like complaining that there's no football to watch, and then you finally get it. And the Texans in particular in this game, it's like you could talk about the ugly football. This is typical AFC South, Houston versus Jacksonville football. This is what you expect, regardless of an 0-3-1 team, a 3-0 team going into Jacksonville. Doesn't matter. You anticipate this type of a game, and it's good to watch a W, you know, for sure. But I love the fact that the Texans defense, who we've kind of used the term this season, bend but don't break, literally played it just that way. They bent a little bit, but they did not break. In fact, they ended up breaking Trevor Lawrence and that Jacksonville offense down pretty good in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that the Texans defense has done really good is they've been good at the goal line, and they've been good in some of the short yardage situations. And I can't always say that about Texans teams. So if you're looking for a positive for this defense this year, I think that's the difference that I've seen from past Texans teams. And by the way, we need you guys to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube. That's how you can support the show. Make sure to look for our midweek show with the latest Texans, Astros, Rockets, and Cougars conversation. Don't forget, we're going to go live for Astros post-game shows this week, starting on Tuesday. So Tuesday and Thursday, look for me and Steven. My OG host is going to come on with me to talk a little Astros and the post-game show. So let's get to this one, Shaun. We like to take it possession by possession. First Texans possession. What else? 3 and out. And of course, Davis Mills throws it 5 feet over Cook's head on third down. It's a tradition like no other. No runs for Dameon Pierce either, which was infuriating.
Yeah, you know, they started this thing out through the air, and so you were kind of wondering what kind of game this was going to play out to be, you know, for Pep Hamilton and this Texans offense. Cooks almost made a great one-handed grab there on that play that you just mentioned, but you know, it looked like Davis Mills was going to have another long, miserable day through the air with that high pass, as we've seen him through the first 4 weeks of the season really struggle with those high balls, especially early in games.
Yeah, he continues to. I mean, it's 5 weeks they've had to figure that out for the Texans. Like, how can we get Davis Mills to not throw the ball 5 feet over a guy's head in 5 weeks? They haven't figured out. So first Jags possession, I should say, Texans force a 3 and out. That's a good start. Texans possession now, third down at midfield. They go to Mr. Third and Short, Scapegoat Rex, who stumbles at coming out of his cut, incompletion. Shaun, it just looked like, you know, you put this thing on the turntable and it just keeps rolling around, and the same old story and the same old song just keeps playing.
Yeah, I mean, they did that a couple of times today. And again, you know, fortunately for Damien Pierce, I think he showed enough today. They seem to go to him a little bit more frequently. Still on some of those swing passes, but he did run a couple of little flat routes today, which he came up with some good catches, and one little block and release play up the middle on an RPO. So I thought that was really good. I think he did enough today as a pass catcher, and again, in blitz pickup to warrant more opportunity. And today's the first time, by the way, that we saw him on the field late in a game, and he helped the Texans. Hell, let's be honest, he won the game for the Houston Texans with a big-time assist from the defense on bookended possessions there by a Texans defense that I mentioned bent but didn't break. But I think we're going to start to see a little bit less of Rex Burkhead on third downs going forward. That's just my inclination. because Pep Hamilton did talk about like tendencies with personnel and play calls when Rex is in the game. And we didn't see that much today. Early on, yeah, sure. On the first couple of possessions, there's no doubt about it. But I'm looking forward to seeing what the offense looks like going forward now that they kind of were able to do some things on the road today. So maybe there's a little bit of an adaptation from Pep Hamilton in this offense going forward.
Yeah, I don't see why they're going to go away from Rex. They even got a third down conversion from him late with a running play, kind of a long running play, which surprised me. But let's go to the next Jags possession. We're going to get back to you mentioned what happened that late drive. We're going to get to that for sure. But the next Jags possession after two huge chunk plays, it gets the Jags out of trouble, but the Texans hold on third down, just like we've been talking about. Bad missed throw, though, by Trevor Lawrence. He didn't look like he was anything special. He didn't look like the first overall pick in the draft any more than Davis Mills looked any good. Texans next chance, 3rd and 8. Mills actually makes a nice sideline throw to Cooks, hits him in the hand. Sean, he's got to make that catch.
Yeah, and Cooks has had a couple of key drops throughout the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, which has been uncharacteristic for him. He had one week 1, and I think one in the Broncos game, and another big one on this possession, as you're talking about. And, again, you're not going to pitch perfect ball games. You're not going to play perfect ball games, but he's missed some really easy balls. That's got to be a little kind of concerning. And I don't think it's just a focus thing or anything like that. I don't know what it is. Sometimes those things for a guy that you trust and have such high expectations for to be Mr. Automatic, sometimes there is no reason. And he's going to catch those balls more times than not. Unfortunately, he's not helped Davis Mills' case early on this season.
You had a chance to talk to Brandon Cooks at all in the locker room in the last few weeks?
No, we don't really talk to him in the locker room because he's made available at the podium every single week around the mid portion. But he's more than willing to answer any of our questions and, has stayed up there for 15 minutes at a time. So, I mean, we've definitely had our opportunities to chat.
So the Jags drive down to the Texans 10 on the next drive, but the Texans get a gift when the Jags don't run the ball once in the red zone when they get that first down. I don't know if anybody noticed that. They settled for the field goal. Texans were giving up 8 yards per carry after that drive. Nothing's changed on the run plays, but they got it together a little bit as the second half rolled around. But after that drive, I got to talk about this, Sean, because the TV sideline reporter, and I can't pronounce her name, so I'm not even going to try to, but she quoted Pep Hamilton on Davis Mills saying, quote, he's trying to teach him how to be a leader. That's what she said. He's trying to teach Davis Mills how to be a leader. Sean, I don't know if you can teach a quarterback to be a leader. Isn't it you are or you are not?
You either have those qualities or you don't. And I think, it's so funny on these, national broadcasts like this, they're getting information that we've already gotten, weeks and weeks in advance. This is their first time talking to coaches and players, and they got their little production meetings before these games and stuff. And so when I hear a lot of this stuff, I just kind of like, yeah, whatever. They have to dumb it down for the broadcast a little bit, but just in regard to the point, I think, yes, you're right for the most part. Like, you either have those qualities or you don't. And I think they do believe that Davis has some of those qualities. And one of them being is that he's not a guy who gets too high or too low. You want a guy that's going to be even keel and command a huddle, command a locker room. I don't think he's there yet. And they also made another mention in and around that part where they're talking about Pep teaching him how to be a leader, where it's like, hey, you got to talk to your guys and let them know what you expect from them. Well, they expect a lot from him as well because he is a starter. But I also think that the players know that Davis is not an experienced guy, even for a rookie, and just given the circumstance. So I think it's just kind of an interesting situation here. But in regard to teaching a guy how to be a leader, yeah, I think you can. I think you can. You have to be able to put him in positions. You have to be able to give him the tools. You have to be able to work with him on how to approach certain situations, whether that be on and or off the field. And so I think you can do that. But look, at the end of the day, it comes down to a little bit of moxie and a little bit of grit, and whether or not you're just going to be able to make the plays when the stage is the biggest, when the lights are the brightest, and when it's crunch time. And through 5 weeks, we haven't really seen that. Today, like I mentioned, Dameon Pierce, this was his game. I thought this was an excellent opportunity for Dameon Pierce to expose Jaguars' run defense that was maybe sold as better than advertised. Or not as good as advertised. They came in today 8th amongst the best rush defenses in the entire NFL, and I thought those numbers were skewed just given their circumstances and how games broke down for them to this point. So, I think Dameon Pierce and the Texans did exactly what I expected him to do in terms of the run today. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Davis Mills operates coming off of his first win this season.
Yeah, you set me up perfectly for the next drive because Dameon Pierce helps them drive down the field. It was mostly Dameon on that drive. They get to 3rd and 4. They decide to run Pierce. Shaun, I don't know if I had much of an issue with them running Pierce on 3rd and 4 because it's not like Davis Mills is super successful on 3rd and 4, and Dameon has been so good in some of these situations. But Quesenberry didn't do a good job of holding his block right there. And I want to go back to 2nd and 5. Scapegoat Rex gets a handoff and gets nothing. And I mean, do we only carry 2 running backs? It continues to be an utter joke. I don't know why we can't throw somebody else in there when Pierce comes off the field for a quick blow and somebody with a little bit more juice than Rex, because it feels like every time Rex is in the game, he's involved in the play. It's a throw to Rex. It's a run. And you mentioned this, and then we just kind of feel like we're repeating ourselves, but we just kind of keep saying it because it keeps happening.
Well, I did just mention it, Pierce, I mean, not Pierce, but Pep Hamilton talked about the tendencies, which he was asked about a couple of times, once by me and once by Brooks Gabino this week, when Rex Burkhead is in the game and it's a 3rd and short, 3rd and manageable situation, or a 4th and short, and they're going forward. It's been Rex Burkhead in the game, and he's either going to run it or they're going to look to try to check down to him or get him a little swing pass or a block and a release kind of pattern. So yeah, I think that's something that I noticed corrected today slightly. I thought it was a horrible play call, to be honest with you, on 3rd and manageable, to be quite honest with you, because Pierce pulled off runs of 12, 7, and 17 on that drive, and you have a 3rd and 4. And again, you go with that tight little bunch set offensively. To me, if I'm a defense, that's exactly what I'm anticipating when I see that, because you're not by bunching it up. You're banking on, yes, your power back, your downhill runner, a guy who's certainly capable of doing that, getting you the yardage, but you have to pitch a perfect ball game in that particular snap, that instance. You have to get all of the blocks. You have to be able to get to the second level. Too much has to go right in a small space. Spread everything out, show a little pre-snap motion, get into the look that you want to get in if you're Davis Mills and Dameon Pierce, if you're going to give him the ball. But just don't be so predictable. Make the defense think. And that's what I feel like Pep Hamilton has failed to do in some big moments, whether it be early or late in games. And fortunately for them in this offense today, Dameon Pierce was able to do enough. And that series in which the Texans were able to eat up about 4 or 5 minutes on the clock where they were driving and Pierce refused to go down, pulled off that 20-yard run late. I mean, that really saved their butt today, because if not for that drive, I really felt like this was going to be a Jacksonville game.
You've said this before, but I will repeat it because I watched the game today. And again, I thought, where are the misdirections? Where is the creativity on offense? It feels like I can guess what the Texans are going to do on most plays. And Shaun, we talk about it because I watch other games. I know what Sean McVay does with the Rams. I see Andy Reid. These guys are good for a reason. And it's not because they're running the same old vanilla situations and the same old vanilla plays. I just want to see a little bit of difference in what the Texans run, and you just never see it.
Here's what we don't see, though. We don't see the practices. And I'll go back just as a brief example, last week's 75-yard run for Dameon Pierce. he said after the game that was a play in which they'd run in practice and really had trouble executing it. They hadn't run that play right once in practice, and they decided to run it in the game last week, and it goes for 75 yards and a touchdown. What we don't see is a lot of the creativity that maybe Pep wants maybe be executed in practice and maybe be comfortable enough to use in-game situations. So I think that is a problem. And that is something, too, that needs to fall on the shoulders of Pep Hamilton and this staff to get the players in a position in practice to where they are getting these reps, they are executing these reps, and they have the confidence to use the player's skills in a game situation that would benefit your offense to continue to move the chains. And that's what we have not seen. They put themselves in these very predictable situations. And to be quite frank, hey, try some stuff. You called a play last week that you hadn't executed, through the first 4 weeks of the season, and you got a touchdown out of it because you trusted your player to make a play. And the Texans do have players on both sides of the ball, but offense in particular, to where if you give them the ball, let them make a play for you. O.J. Howard being one of them. Nico Collins being another. They gave him a great 50-50 ball in this game today, and he went up and got it and made a great play in a big moment for the Texans. Same thing with Dameon Pierce. And even Rex Burkhead. You have to give the guys props who pulled off that 9-yard third down run for the Texans. I think at the time it was like their second or third straight third down conversion after starting the game 0 for 5. Today, you have to let your guys make plays. If you're going to use them, give them the ball, let them make a play for you, and that's how you build confidence if it's not done, Monday through Friday in practice.
Agreed. Game tied now at 3 after Fairbairn's field goal. Jags on offense. Garrett Wallow, great play in coverage, a rarity for a Texans linebacker. Then Desmond King with the huge fourth down pass deflection. King making plays all through the first half. Texans respond with a drive, but a delay of game penalty on first down near the 30 basically kills the drive. They can't recover typically when they're going to get moved back a little bit during a first or second down. Then they wasted down on a worthless, again, scapegoat Rex screen. This is Rex Burkhead. Scapegoat Rex is my nickname for him. So we know that 3 or 4 yards that's the best that they're going to do on that type of play. Mills throws it into double coverage then on third down, and a pass that had no shot, Shaun, just no shot. And that's going back to just what you said. Just let your guy make a play sometimes. And that one was, I think, impossible because he was thrown into double coverage. And I looked at what I could see from television, and nobody else was in double coverage of any of the receivers, but he threw it to the one guy on the field of the 4 or 5 receivers that did have double coverage in that play.
Well, unless the defense is doing something exotic where they're going to drop an extra linebacker back into coverage and, only rush 4 or 5 guys. If you have double coverage in the secondary, somebody else is going to be singled up, and you got to be able to find them. And whether that player is able to run into some space, if Mills couldn't get through a progression in time, you don't know. That's something you have to go back and look at the all-22 on. But, yeah, look, Mills in that particular situation, it was a bad ball. It was a bad look. It shouldn't have happened. And those are situations, again, where I think if you go back and look at the film, ask yourself the question, are you seeing the Texans run something shallow, intermediate, and then deep into the field with their route concepts? And I don't think we see that all the time. I think, the bye week kind of comes at a perfect time. I know a lot of people were complaining that it's a little too early in the season, especially now we're going to a 17-game season for the second straight year. Usually the Texans have it around the perfect time, around weeks 8, 9, or 10, something like that. But this might be a good step back, self-scouting, reevaluating like some things that the Texans can maybe tweak offensively after having a pretty good sample size of 5 weeks now under your belt, getting your first win on what Pep Hamilton can maybe do to tweak some things offensively and give Davis Mills more opportunities, maybe make it a little bit easier for him. As they've said to this point numerous times, this system under Pep is vastly different than the one that was in place last year, where a lot of the responsibility was on him. If they can put in some quick, faster reads for Mills, then maybe they can start to open this offense up as the rest of the season rolls along.
Well, you've got more confidence in them knowing how to adjust over 2 weeks than I have, because I've seen them not adjust over 1 week and another week and another week and another week. But let's get to the next possession after Fairbairn hits, by the way, his second 50-yard or more field goal. So that was good stuff from Fairbairn in this game. But final few minutes of the half, Jags drive down the field. They get called for a holding. And then on third down, looked like Travis Etienne fumbled after the catch. Petrie recovered, but it was overruled, called an incompletion. I thought it was the right call, Shaun. It looked like he had not really got the ball totally in his possession by the time the fumble happened.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting play. And as you say that, I'm thinking back to even when Dameon Pierce fumbled towards the end of the game, and they reviewed that, and the call stood as he was down by contact. That even too was pretty close. I didn't think that was a bad challenge at all by Jacksonville in that instance. I thought it was close enough to where they had to throw the flag. And with this play that you're talking about, the pressure by Malik Collins, which was great. He made a couple of big flash plays early on, forced Lawrence out of the pocket. Kirksey forced the fumble. Petrie recovers, as you mentioned. Ruled an incomplete pass. I forget who the former referee they bring on to break that whole thing down, but he said possession, 2 feet, and a football move. Well, the problem for me in that instance was, as he was getting his second foot down, the transfer was taking place for him to get ready to make a football move. I thought it was a catch, and he was losing it on the transfer. To me, you catch a ball, you're transferring it. It's the same kind of thing that we see in baseball sometimes. You get the runner stealing second base, the throw down to second to the shortstop, and they catch it, and you're a double play and not a stolen bag, but you lose it on the transfer. Well, if you catch the ball, immediately, you still get that out at second. You lose it on the transfer. To me, it was kind of the same thing. And these calls are always kind of head scratchers, but fortunately for the Texans, did set up a 25-yard attempt for the Jacksonville Jaguars in that instance, and they tied the game. But fortunately for the Texans, it didn't go for 7 in that instance. So they got a break there.
Well, I agree with you. I would rather the NFL side on somebody catching a ball and maybe having a fumble over not, but nothing's changed over the last 20 years. They always seem to side on the least interesting, I should say, side that they can do it. So I totally did not expect that one to hold up. And, frankly, if we're going by what the NFL does on every other type of one of these plays, then that was the call to make. So first possession of the second half, Jags walk it down the field. Terrible pass by Trevor Lawrence into the end zone, right at Stingley. The only thing Stingley screwed up was trying to run it out of the end zone, John. He's tackled at the 1-yard line. Yeah,
you could say, I guess, maybe a rookie mistake. He got a little excited and wanted to try to stack a great play on already a great play with the interception. Maybe if he's a veteran, he's got the foresight to where he takes a knee there and the Texans move that ball out. And who knows what that drive yields after another great defensive play by the Texans, which they made plenty of in both the first and second half. Unfortunately, which I feel like something that we're kind of glossing over is every single drive, Robert, that the Jacksonville Jaguars had yielded a big play. The Texans gave up, I stopped counting at 7, and that was like midway through the third quarter. I'll bet you they gave up 8, maybe 9 max plays that went for 20-plus yards or more. The fact that the Texans defense gave up big plays seemingly on every defensive possession, but were able to come up with a good pass rush, a stop on a third down, a turnover. I mean, that was absolutely huge. And so Stingley with a great job there in the red zone, picking that ball. Sure, it was a mistake, but I mean, what just a stop to prevent a score there for the Jaguars, which could have changed the complexion of this ball game in a big way.
Well, Luke says in our comments, and a nod to Luke Losser, good observation. The Texans defense cannot play in space. They lack the talent to cover the whole field. And speaking to what you were talking about, Shaun, and speaking to what Luke says, covering the whole field, I mean, Grugier Hill is a disaster. I cannot imagine that there's not a guy that you could get off the waiver wire that does more on defense than Grugier, that is just does anything, because I saw Grugier Hill just running into block after block on running plays. He was not making a play on running plays. We haven't seen him do that this year. I don't know what he does well on the field, because he's also terrible in pass coverage, and he looks extremely slow and plodding. It's like I'm watching Brian Cushing all over again.
Well, and you'd take Brian Cushing, in a lot of respects. So that dude was a thumper and an absolute warrior. But, Grugier Hill in pass coverage today, especially, he's just a step slow with his reaction. And then he doesn't have the athleticism, I don't think, to make up for that and get back into space and throw a hand up and bat a ball down. Luckily for the Texans, they did have some guys do that today. Stingley had the interception that we just talked about, but Garrett Wallow, who I think one of the announcers today in the game said in the first half was probably the MVP of the defense, because the guy did make some really good plays. And you talk about making plays in space. I mean, I don't know if he over pursued rather, but Wallow showed the athleticism to correct some of those mistakes and get back into space, throw a hand up, knock balls down today, and prevent some even bigger plays and drives continuing for the Jaguars. So I thought the Texans defensively, as many big plays as they gave up today, did some things that we had not seen them do through the first 5 weeks for the first time today. And that did come from, their linebacker core, Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley, Steven Nelson. I mean, you can kind of go around. Where's Malik Collins been? I thought he had a really good first half. And in the second half, the defense really, I think everybody kind of stepped up and made some good plays, but nobody more than just this Texans secondary, which stifled Trevor Lawrence at the end of the day.
Yeah, we're going to mention a big play by Malik Collins in the not too distant future, but the Texans drive to midfield, 3rd and short, throw to Pierce, comes up 1 yard short. And I don't have a big issue with that one. I want to see the ball more in Pierce's hands, even though he had the one drop later today that was later in the game, is pretty big. But would you have gone for it on 4th and 1 there?
No, I thought about it for a millisecond, and I thought this is absolutely the right call. And the number one reason was because you'd put together a 12-play drive that ate up 8 minutes and 10 seconds off of the game clock. So your defense had a breather after already coming up with the big stop a couple of possessions earlier. So they were rested. You figure if you're Lovie Smith, okay, look, 4th and 1, you think about it for a millisecond, but then you realize, hey, my defense is making plays. Let me put them back out there. We'll see if we can pin them deep on a punt, and we'll call it a day there. I just thought that was the absolute right play. Maybe if you're a little bit deeper into their territory, you really consider going for it on 4th and 1, but given their field position and the Jags' big play capability that they'd shown to that point, which I believe they'd put together 6 plays of at least 20 yards at that instance, it was absolutely the right call.
Jags next possession, they drive to the 38, but when they go for it on 4th and 1, here he is, Malik Collins comes up with a big stop. So now it's Davis Mills in the 4th quarter. I'm so excited. What's going to happen? Nothing more Texans fans get excited about than Davis Mills in the 4th quarter. A sack basically kills the drive. We know the Texans can't lose yardage and get a first down. They go to scapegoat Rex on 3rd and long. So basically, if you're going to scapegoat Rex on 3rd and long, Sean, just punt it. Just punt it right there. Punt it on 3rd down. Just punt it right there.
Hang, all right, David Culley. Jeez, calm down with that. I saw you tweet that during the game, and I was like, come on, Robert. Hey, textbook Texans, right? You take an 8-yard loss on a sack on 1st down, and you put yourself in a 3rd and long situation, and there's nobody open down the field. So, of course, you're going to have this check down crap with Rex. You got to get rid of the ball to somebody. You can't take another sack, and you don't want to throw the ball away in that instance. I mean, you want to try to get the ball to somebody, and maybe they can make a play. Rex.
How about for once in a blue moon, throw the ball deep down the field outside of, I think, that big play by Nico Collins late in the game. There was 0 throws past 20 yards down the field in this game. There were no deep throws. Just give it a shot. I mean, what's an extra 5 or 10 yards for a punt right there? You've got a great punter. The Jags aren't exactly a juggernaut offense at this point in the game. Just give your guy a shot. If you throw it down the field and what happens if there's a pass interference. You have things that can happen that are good. And we saw a pass interference that the Texans picked up late in the game. Nico thankfully caught the ball. Great catch, incredible catch. But I mean, give your team a shot to make a play. And that's what the Texans never do. They won't throw it deep enough. They don't want to make throws that, you give your wide receiver a shot to catch like that. All of that happened in that one particular catch later in the game. But where is that the other 4.5 games of the season?
I don't know. We got to go back and look at the film on that play, because maybe the Texans did run something, a route or two that was deeper down the field, and they were looking, for a first down in that instance. I mean, your first option on a 3rd and long is not, I can't believe, Rex Burkhead. I mean, that was a situation where Mills probably had one guy in mind, didn't flash open. Let's get rid of the ball, give it to Rex, and, call it a day. Maybe he makes a play.
It looked very designed, though, and most of his plays look like that's the first option. I guess that's my point. And
I also think it's this. I mean, it's going to look like that, Robert, if in fact you don't have a quarterback, and this goes together. If you don't have an offensive line that's going to give ample time on a 3rd and long situation for him to finish a progression, it's going to look like it's more of design, because maybe Mills didn't get an opportunity to finish his progression in that instance. Maybe Pep Hamilton and maybe Davis Mills himself doesn't trust that he can look beyond his first 2 progressions and scan a field. If that first guy's not there, boom, let me check it down. And that's a problem.
Well, the first option, if you're going to go deep down the field, should be that. And then if it's not there, you got Rex out of the backfield or whatever. But it just too many times, I don't see him go to a 2nd or 3rd progression. That is not Davis Mills. And that's why, among a billion reasons why I have no confidence in this guy going forward. But let's get to the good Rex, get to the good Davis stuff, because Jags go 3 and out. Texans get a couple of great catches from Nico Collins, the one that I mentioned, another big catch in that drive as well. They get a massive personal foul penalty. Thank you very much, Jacksonville. Huge 3rd and 10 catch by Jordan Akins in that drive. And then Dameon Pierce with the run of the season, the run of the game, the play of the game. Just wow.
He's stacking them up, isn't he? I mean, the 75-yard run last week was the play of the season for the Texans. In general, I think, outside of maybe that Nico Collins catch that Davis Mills made, that 58-yard strike, and then that touchdown to Cooks in the game last week, or maybe it was the week prior. But sure. Here's the thing, though. Before that Pierce run, that maybe doesn't happen if, in fact, the Texans aren't able to overcome a little adversity. Dorsett was called with that BS holding call, which put him in a tough spot. There was that miscommunication between Mills and Howard on a route. It looked like Mills thought Howard was supposed to run a curl towards the sideline. Instead, he stayed upfield. So that was a miscommunication there. That put him in a bad position, and they were the beneficiaries of that roughing the passer call, that personal foul on the Jags, which was huge. That set everything up. Then you had a little breathing room. You fit one into Collins, and then you find Akins on the sideline for a first down, and then it's Pierce time. And I thought all of those things for the Texans to be able to overcome some of those adversities in that particular possession, I thought that was huge. That set Pierce up. And Pierce, that dude, I told you, I think after week 1, by season's end, we're going to be talking about one number in particular with Dameon Pierce, and it's not going to be 1,000 yards rushing. It's going to be yards after contact. And they flashed a graphic up during the broadcast today. 310 yards or 313 yards coming into today's game on the season for Pierce. 301 of them were after contact. I wonder what those numbers are today, because that guy in that 20-yard run alone, Robert, broke 5 tackles. Maybe you make an argument for 6, on that last little pile that he bust out of. That guy is absolutely incredible. He is a star. I don't care. The guy should run for well over 1,000 yards this season, regardless of what the Texans continue to look like offensively. If they don't give him the ball, they're doing it wrong.
The only reason I'm watching the games anymore is because I want to see what Dameon Pierce is going to do with the football. And speaking of, you mentioned there were some overcoming some stuff in that drive. The Dorsett penalty, I thought, was real questionable. Like you said, it just felt like they were getting nitpicky for some reason. And there was the Titus Howard. Wasn't it that drive where he gets called for a procedure penalty, but he jumps back after their guy jumps into the neutral zone over the center? I mean, that was the initial thing. And, when you jump in the neutral zone, the play should be over with at that point, especially when you're right over the center. I just thought that was just a no-brainer that they were going to give the nose tackle for the Jags the penalty right there.
Yeah, 100%. And they even made mention of that on the broadcast. I thought Feely did a really good job in his analysis today. He said the same thing with the Dorsett. The problem is, for players, everything is kind of bang, bang. In an instance, for the referees, some of that stuff is very bang, bang as well. When you see a player's hands get outside of the shoulder pads, you're going to throw your flag 9 times out of 10. The problem is, are you able to slow your brain down, compartmentalize what you're seeing and understand that 175-pound Philip Dorsett is probably not leveraging himself in any type of way against a 320-pound guy in that instance. Like, that's just not a hold. He didn't move him. He wasn't moved. It was a quick grab, bang, bang. And that was a BS call. 100% right on the neutral zone, which what should have been a neutral zone infraction. And I don't know if it was the back judge, somebody fell asleep at the wheel there, but that flag should have been thrown before Titus Howard's false start flag was thrown. There's no doubt about that. But those are the kinds of plays that we talk about on a Monday morning that could be a difference in a win or a loss. And the Texans were able to overcome some of that and some miscommunications to their own doing offensively and get the ball to a guy that they had not been able to give the ball to late in a game in those kinds of situations for 5 weeks, Robert. 4 weeks leading up to this one, and that's Dameon Pierce. This is the first time all season that the guy's been on the field for a meaningful snap inside of the 6.5-minute mark in the fourth quarter, and you did exactly what you're paying the guy for. That's why you signed him to a 4-year, $4.5 million contract, because you know what kind of runner he could be. You know what you saw him show in Florida on limited carries, and you've brought him along solely enough. What he did in blitz pickup today as a pass catcher out of the backfield and pass protection and running the rock against the 8th best team against the rush, statistically, they certainly didn't look like it today, as Dameon Pierce, made them look like absolute frauds for a couple of those runs, that 20-yarder in particular. The Texans should have a big time boost of confidence in Dameon Pierce and what he can do for his team late in games.
He also made a couple of big blocks in the backfield. And one of those times he makes a big block in the backfield. They still get the sack, but it wasn't his fault because there were 2 guys running free. And this offensive line, you said a little something about the offensive line not giving Davis Mills protection. I think they do a good job. I mean, to me, Davis Mills gets happy feet too often. He gets a little bit, nervous in the pocket. We didn't see that as much late in this game. Thankfully, he wasn't doing that. But the offensive line, again, I thought had a really good game. And there was the bogus call on Titus Howard. And otherwise, you didn't even think about the offensive line. And there's a reason, because they were doing a darn good job. I thought Quisenberry, he's still a guy that you worry about, but he's your backup center. And that's what's going to happen with the backup center. So Pierce gets the 1-yard touchdown. It comes down to the Texans defense. Jags at midfield when Rasheem Green knocks down a 3rd down pass. Then Trevor Lawrence misses a man deep on 4th down. Really, I don't know what he was doing on 4th down, but we'll take it. Derek Stingley had that guy blanketed. And the only thing, I just want to say this about Derek Stingley. The only thing that frustrates me about Derek Stingley is when I see him in zone coverage, because you're wasting one of the best cornerbacks, I think, of the future by having him in zone coverage and not having him in man, because he's been great in man this year, except for there was a couple of hiccups maybe in that Broncos game, Sean, but otherwise, I mean, how many times have you seen him get beat in man this year?
I mean, it's been very few. You'd have to really kind of go back and look and think about it. But I mean, the guy's been very, very good, and to battle through what Lovie Smith was calling a bruise. Stingley was in a brace all week at practice and limited at some point. Did even practice in full with a brace on in practice this week. For him to go out and do what he did, I think today, to have that kind of a game and to show no limitations whatsoever with that left elbow, shoulder, whatever it was, if it's a hyperextension. Maybe we'll never know. But that guy's a tough sucker, and he's a baller. And you could tell he's really kind of starting to find his way each and every week. He's doing something impactful and different and taking a step. And I think that's really cool to see. In terms of like, are you wasting the guy, by having him in his own coverage? Look, maybe Lovie Smith, takes this week to evaluate some stuff through the first 5 weeks of the season and sees that, maybe you're right. Maybe we can do some different stuff with Stingley, maybe play a mix zone coverage, so to speak, have zone on one side and, man Stingley up on the other and show some different kind of exotic looks. Maybe the Texans were going to feel more confident with their capabilities to do that when they get guys like Christian Harris back. Mario Addison made his Texan debut today. They're supposed to get Tavier Thomas back pretty soon. So maybe they have some guys they can input defensively to where they can give some different, more exotic looks, kind of like we saw in the preseason, with Tavier Thomas in particular, coming in as a nickel corner, playing real close to the line of scrimmage, and him and Petrie, switching men, bringing Tavier, on a safety blitz or a corner blitz and letting Petrie take that slot receiver. Maybe we see some stuff like that. That's what this week is for. That's what you got to use the bye week for, to get guys healthy, but also do a lot of self-scouting and make some tweaks and figure out some tendencies that maybe you're doing and not doing defensively that could help your team down the road.
Yeah, it's worth saying again, because I did mention Desmond King earlier having a big game. Nelson had a really good, Nelson has been super solid. You don't hear a lot of bad things with either one of those guys, and you've got Stingley doing what he's doing. So the quarterbacks overall, I thought, have played really well this year, and the safeties, and it's that side of the defense you're not worried about. It's the linebackers and the defensive line getting something done. And there was no, we haven't mentioned it, there was no Jonathan Grenard, and I don't know if Sean, you noticed that he was not on the field, because you don't really notice when he is on the field this year, unfortunately.
We actually on Friday spent about 30 minutes talking to Grenard in the locker room before we left as a media. And he didn't practice. He had a DNP this week, was limited in practice with an ankle injury, but there was really, I don't think, any concern that he wasn't going to play. I was kind of shocked by him not making the trip to Jacksonville and playing with the team, because he sounded good, looked good, seemed to be moving around okay, nothing too cumbersome. But yeah, you're right. Like a guy coming off of a team high 8.5 sacks last season, supposed to be, another stepping stone kind of year for Grenard to really entrench and make a name for himself with this defense and help bring some of the younger guys along. Yeah. This Texans defensive line today, without him out there, I thought really stepped up and made some plays, and they got a little boost from the linebackers. Garrett Wallow really, I thought, had his best game to date as a Houston Texan by far in a small sample size. And maybe that's a guy, if he can stay healthy, Robert, that can help this team. Maybe he does have the athleticism to be a more guy that can make some plays in space and swallow up some of those gaps in the intermediary that the Texans have been burned in so much. And they got burned today. But the more healthy bodies that they get back, Robert, Christian Harris, Tavier Thomas, Mario Addison, who I don't know what exactly they expect from a 35-year-old, 12-year NFL vet, but a healthy body is a healthy body. And a bulldog is exactly what he is. If they can squeeze the last little bit of juice out of him, for a few weeks, then that would be a good thing, because it's at the end of the day, you're trying to put these young players in position to make plays. Okay. We could talk all day long about, hey, this team is not trying to win, blah, 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 whatever. I want to see the dudes that are going to be here for the next 4, 5, 6 years and beyond be in position to be able to make some plays and give us something to be excited about. And before today, there was really only one or two of those guys total, offensively. Dameon Pierce, Kenyon Green. Defensively, my gosh, Derek Stingley and Jalen Petrie had stolen the show. I kind of like what I saw with Garrett Wallow today. And there's some other guys with that defensive line. Roy Lopez Kurt Heinisch. I want to see what those guys can do if they can stay healthy for the remainder of the season, what impact they can have on this organization going forward.
Can you see me? I know I'm going in and out. You see me okay? You can hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I see my videos going off and on, but Nico Collins, 4 catches, 64 yards. Davis Mills, not much, 16 for 24, 140 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. But Shaun, I mean, those guys came up big when it mattered, and that's something you could take positive and maybe some confidence going into the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no question. No question. Nico Collins, he's not a guy that's caught 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 balls for the Texans, in a game this season, but he's come up with big catches. And I think that's a big time confidence booster. It has to be. He talked about that this last week, what that 58-yard bomb meant for a confidence boost for him and Davis Mills. And he was like, dude, we know Davis is an athlete. Like, we know he can make those throws. We just hadn't seen it in games. And he gave himself a shot last week, and he made good on it. Gave another shot in a big situation today and made good on it. You got to be able to go to other guys not named Brandon Cooks and Rex Burkhead in situations when you need it. And maybe it's games like last week and this week, and getting a dub goes an extra long way. Going forward, that's a good thing.
Yeah, the Davis Mills line is not good, but the thing that mattered, fourth quarter, finally, he shows up in a big drive and he makes some throws. And the big thing for Davis, like we said, just throwing to Nico and saying, you make the play. I don't need to go at 90 miles an hour, 4 guys, or try to make this and thread the needle. Just give your guy a chance. And that's what he did on a couple of those big plays.
100%. 100%. And, let's see what they can come up with after a week off with this bye week and getting ready for the Raiders. And let's, they continue to play close, competitive games, and they made enough plays today to come out with a W. And so I want to see how the young guys and the rookies take that and going forward.
Yeah, that'll do it. The Texans finally get a W. They get their first win of the season, moving to 1-3-1. They get a bye week, so we'll do the live show in a couple of weeks. But me and Shaun are going to come back and doing our midweek show. Like I said, the Astros post games are coming up, and looking really forward to that a lot. It should be fun. Stay with us for all of that on Houston Sports Talk. We'll talk to you guys real soon.